Today we're going to talk about the top 5 most overrated teams in VCT for 2025. Now, it must be said before we dive into anything on this list that the word overrated gets bandied around a lot, and I think often people conflate the word overrated with bad. And I just want to start off at the top of this video saying that when I say that someone is overrated, that does not mean that they are bad. It means that the general perception of them by the wider community is too high relative to where at least I believe it to be. Of course, at this point, we don't really know. But I'm going to give you a list of 5 teams that I don't think are bad. In fact, a lot of these teams I actually think will be pretty good. But I think that people might be just hyping them up a bit too much. And by the way, this list is not easy to create. In fact, I would like you to create your top 5 lists of most overrated teams, and you'll probably have a couple in your mind that you think people are too high on. But once you start getting through the list, it actually gets quite hard to think of teams of like you actually really don't think will be as good as people think. Anyway, let's dive into my list though, starting at number 5, which is going to be Talon. Now, the reason that I've gone for Talon at number 5 is because I think that people are expecting quite a bit from this Talon team, right? I think a large part of that is because they went to champs last year, right? They went to champs, but I'd just like to remind people really that essentially Talon went to champs. As you can see, they didn't win a single map at that champions, and also they only just scraped in past Team Secret here, winning a 13-11 and another 13-11 to actually make it to champs, right? Before then losing 8 maps in a row. So yes, whilst they did make it to champs, I still do have some doubts about this team, and it would not shock me if this team, you know, didn't make it to an international maybe until champs again, right? They haven't made any changes to their lineup, and I think a lot of people are looking at Primi's development as a reason of, you know, why this team will be so much better. But I also think that a lot of the other teams are going to improve as well, and so Talon are just gonna, you know, end up at the bottom of the list here. Again, not because I think that they'll be bad, I think they'll be pretty good, but I'm not expecting like the world from them. Coming in at number 4 is a team that made a big splash move during the off season, and that is MIBR. And the reason that I've put MIBR on this list is, of course, because they signed Aspas. There are just some people that think, oh, you have Aspas, you're gonna be one of the best teams in the world. Maybe that will be the case, but there are, of course, a lot of unknowns here, right? We know that Aspas, of course, is incredibly good. I think that Fraud is also a very good coach, right? Noswa is a very solid tier 1 player, and then you've got Acend, who was, you know, okay last year, and then 2 players who have never played in tier 1 before, and, you know, these 3, I think, are pretty big question marks as to how they are going to perform, not just in tier 1, but how they're going to perform with expectation on their shoulders as well, because now you have Aspas, right? And so a lot of people, I think that MIBR will be, you know, one of the best teams in Americas, and maybe by the end of the season that'll be the case. But I think particularly early on, I think that MIBR could actually struggle a bit and not even be, you know, one of the top 6 teams in Americas to start the season. That really wouldn't surprise me, but some people really think that this team straight away is just going to be incredible because Aspas. Okay, coming in at number 3, we're going to head over to EMEA. And for this one, we're going to talk about Kamikor. And this one is tough. You know, this one isn't easy, and I am putting my neck out here. I am really with the top 3. The top 3 is pretty spicy, I won't lie. But we're talking about Kamikor because the expectation as well for Kamikor here with this team, again, is pretty high. But I think there are, again, significant questions that you can have over Kamikor and how it went. Obviously, last year we saw them make an international and then kind of have a very topsy-turvy kind of up and down season where they didn't go to any other internationals. You've kept Eng, you've kept Martin, but that's it. You've made 4 changes from that roster, right? You bring in Sadak, who obviously, again, the expectation is through the roof because you're bringing in one of the best IGLs in Valorant's history. You're bringing in Sugetsu, who's also won an international tournament. Elite was, you know, a very good player on BBL last year as well, and Aves is perhaps a bit of an unknown, but there's still so many questions of how this is all going to work, right? Like, what is Sadek's calling like in a different language, right? In English, you know, how does Elite do on an English-speaking roster, you know, not a Turkish-speaking roster for the first time? You know, how does Sugetsu integrate when he's been with one team for so long and is now having to play in, you know, maybe a different role and also in a very different team, right? There are definite questions here. Can the team kind of, you know, rein Martin in? And so I just think that whilst there is definitely hope, I'm not saying that, you know, this team shouldn't have hope to be pretty good, because they should, But there are a lot of questions here for Kamikor, and I don't think you can just pencil them in as like, oh, they're going to be incredible, one of the top teams, because there are so many questions about this team. Now let's come to the top two, which are a pretty spicy top two, because people expect these teams to be really quite good. And what I'm basically saying here is that it's not that I don't think they'll be good, but I think a lot of people are, penciling these kind of teams in to finish, and maybe win an international tournament, or certainly finish in like top threes a lot of the time. But at number two, well, I've gone for G2. The reason that I've put G2 there is because whilst I do agree that adding Jorgmo into an already recognized, very good team of, the G2 core that was there, last season. And also I should admit, they did do well last season, right? They did, go deep in Masters Shanghai. Their champs wasn't as good, and that is one thing that I am putting into this. But I just don't think that G2 will win an international tournament this year. And I think that most people think that, that's a very high possibility. And I don't even necessarily know why, but I just don't. I just don't think that G2 will win an international tournament. I think that G2 will go to probably most of the international tournaments, if not all of them, and they'll do okay at them. But that's it. And maybe I'm a hater. Maybe I am a hater. And I love Jorgmo. I think Jorgmo is an amazing player. And I have nothing against this G2 team. I like this G2 team so much. So many people disliked the G2 team last year, and I really loved the G2 team last year. But then somehow they've ended up on this list because I just think they're not going to win an international tournament, basically. And then the same is true for our number one team here as well, where, like G2, I'm sure a lot of you are watching it and going, what the hell is TMV on about? G2 are incredibly good. They will be incredibly good. Well, a lot of people think that for my number one team here as well. But again, I just don't see them winning like an international tournament. I could see them maybe even flaming out this team. With G2, I didn't put them number one because I think that they at least will be very good. Right? Even if I don't think they'll win an international, they will make internationals for sure. This team is a team that a lot of people are hyping up. It would not shock me if they flamed out somewhat. And that is T1. Okay, so G2 for 2 and T1 for 1. Because whilst this team, on paper, looks incredibly good, and I obviously love the signing of Buzz and Meteor, and I think that Sylvan, Itsu, Stacks are all very, very good. I just think that it's going to be incredibly competitive in Pacific, and it would not shock me if they didn't make the first two internationals, and then you started to see some cracks form. When you're talking about teams like Gen G, Paper X, I actually think that Nongshim could be up there as well, right? And you're probably likely, like it just is likely that at least one of the other teams, be it a Talon, be it a Secret, be it a whoever, right? One of those other teams likely is going to be much better than we expect, right? It happened with Gen G, it happened with Heretics. It's likely to happen again with some team that is just going to be much better than you perhaps expected. Maybe it's DFM who have kind of shown it somewhat, during the off-season events. Well, that means that, these top teams that we all expect to be good, like NRG last year, sometimes they're not going to be that good. Right? Like Na'Vi last year. Sometimes they're just not going to be that good. At this time last year, we were all talking about, oh, it's Fnatic, Na'Vi, and EMEA. Well, it wasn't. Right? Oh, NRG are the super team in America. Well, they weren't. Right? So, I'm just going out on a limb and saying that of the teams in the top, specifically in Pacific, I think that T1 are the team that is most likely to potentially fall on their face. And I'm sure that some of you will disagree with that heavily, and that is fine, because at this point we have no idea. And I'm sure that many of you will come back to this, after the Grand Champs final of, G2 versus T1. I'm sure you'll come back to this video and be like, this was the most wrong prediction of all time. And maybe it will be, but what I want you to do is, for when you do at me for this video, when G2 play T1 in the Champs Grand Final, I want you to make your list of the top 5 overrated VCT teams so I can come back to the comments and laugh at your lists as well. With that said, hope you enjoyed the video and subscribe to the Acend channel for more.